Okay, let's open a word of prayer. Lord, thank you for this day. We pray you'll bless our time together as we discuss some pretty heavy topics. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, today what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things I saw in Israel. That'll be more at the end, although it'll be kind of interspersed. As you know, I've spent a good part of the last month in Israel, making 2 trips there. Love sitting on an airplane. The one thing I've noticed is when you're on an airplane for 12 and a half hours, the airplane turns into a third world country. From all the trash and the rest, it's unbelievable. And we're paying all that money to get on that thing. So, and it applies across the plane. I mean, I got off the plane, every flight was jam-packed full. And it looked like Ohio Stadium after a Buckeye game with all the trash on the floor and everything. It was unbelievable. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things going on mostly in the Middle East, in Israel, Gaza, Syria, the fronts that Israel faces. Then I have a couple things to share that I saw in Israel. It was a great time. So again, we talk each week. So I call it Cascading Crises, because there's a lot going on. And I don't even have time to update my title slides anymore, except the title and the date. It's really unbelievable, the things that are going on. I literally could talk for hours up here. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things going on in the Middle East. Well, I only talk an hour and a half. That's not technically hours, right? So this seems to be the epicenter. Just share something quickly about this. So my tour group went up there on the Temple Mount a few weeks ago when I was there. And we got up there and there was nobody up there. It was kind of amazing. A group of Jewish people went by, about 30 people, and once they went by, there were maybe 25 people on the entire top of the Temple Mount. So we had access to everything. We went over, and in the area, let's see if I can get my laser pointer here. So over here in this area, on the right-hand side, you see that right there? That's the Eastern Gate. I point out something, and I pointed out to another tour group, which they were not aware of. If you ever go to the Temple Mount, go over by the Eastern Gate, and this is the closed gate on the east side of the Temple Mount. This is the one that people think the Messiah will come through. It's been a closed thing. So this gate right here, and outside here is a Muslim cemetery. And then the Lion's Gate is up here, right up about there to the old city. So anyway, off to the left of the Lion's Gate, of the Eastern Gate, there's some tarps covering some logs, beams. These beams, there was an article in Biblical Archaeology in 2013 talking about them. They were able to get access to them. And by the way, these things, they're still there. They haven't moved. Where did they come from? Back in the 1920s, there was an earthquake, and it destroyed the roof of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is the mosque here at the center south part of the Temple Mount, lower part of the slide. And so the way they do things over there is when something falls down, they don't throw things away. They use it to rebuild. So, for example, this is one of the reasons why I think that the theory that the Temple Mount was over the city of David is complete nonsense. Because if there was a temple that had been there and been destroyed, there would be debris, right? There's no debris. Okay, so they're not going to carry away this stuff, because if you ever picked up a big rock, what's the one thing you know about a big rock? It's very heavy and it's hard to move. So they're not going to waste the time. So they'll just use materials over and over again to rebuild. So they took the beams from the destroyed roof of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and they didn't know what to do with them. So they stuck them over there by the Eastern Gate under a tarp. Archaeologists, Randall Price and some others were able to get access to them, and they carbon dated them. First of all, they found out that they were cedars of Lebanon. Now, that ought to bring to mind some things that are talked about in the Bible, because what was used in the building of the first and second temple? Cedars from Lebanon. Now, the first temple was built about 3,000 years ago. So when they carbon dated one of the logs, one of the beams, it turned out to be 3,000 years old. Then the other 7 beams that they had turned out to be 2,000 years old, which would be from the time of Herod's temple. So a lot of archaeologists have concluded, and I think that they're correct, that those are actually beams from the first and second temples, laying there under a tarp on the Temple Mount. You can go see them, you can see part of them. And I think at this point, they're watched very closely, so nobody's going to go burn them up or do anything with them, because it would, well, burning them up would cause a firestorm, literally. It would be a big problem. So that's a little bit about what we have. As you know, I was at the Media Summit, Christian Media Summit, for about a week, and then I stayed over a few days, and it was an incredible time meeting people from all over the world. We went all over Israel. We went up to the Lebanon border and Syria one day. I'll have a few comments about that when I talk about Syria. We went down to the Gaza envelope. I had also done that on the tour that I led in early to mid-October. And I have to tell you up front that when you go there and you see these places that you read about in the news, you begin to understand the real threats that Israel faces. It's a very small area of the world. The first flight, we came in with my tour, at least the people on my flight, from Newark. We had to fly around 4 times to try to land because there was a drone loose at the airport. And I think they didn't want to shoot it at the drone and miss the drone and hit the plane, because that would have been bad. You know, that would have not been a good start to our tour. But as we were flying around up there, and did I share this before? Okay. As we were flying around up there for 50 minutes, trying to land 4 times, we covered the whole land of Israel. I mean, from north to south, east to west. So I told people this was planned for our tour because we wanted you to see the whole land. But it's not that big. I mean, you make a couple passes around the airport and you've gone from the Galilee to Gaza. And by the way, so there was a drone loose. Flight attendants looked very nervous. We flew around for 50 minutes. They never explained what was going on. One of the flight attendants did go to somebody, I found out, that was sitting next to people in my tour group and said, "Are you Christians?" "Yes." "Would you please pray?" Well, that's not really what you want the flight attendant to be saying. So anyway, it turned out no harm, no foul. Everybody landed and we were safe and that type of thing. But I did ask the flight attendants, hey, this is the way I think. We flew around for 50 extra minutes. Do I get extra frequent flyer miles on my frequent flyer account? And they laughed. They thought it was funny. We almost got diverted to Athens because the flight attendant said we were planning where we were going to go eat in Athens because it looked like we were going to get diverted there. It has nothing to do with Bible prophecy, by the way. Okay, so let's start into this with what's going on in the Middle East. I'm trying to find where my slides start. My presentations keep getting bigger and bigger. So I want to go back a little bit. There was this big meeting that took place in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, back as they were discussing these peace deals. And so Trump gets everybody together. He has Erdogan there. He has al-Sisi from Egypt. He has the guys from Qatar. He has the Saudis there. And there's one guy, though, who's missing from this big conglomeration of people to talk about Peace 2025. And who is that? Benjamin Netanyahu. He was told not to come because all of these guys don't want a photo op with Benjamin Netanyahu. So Trump pushed this, and we're going to have peace. We're going to do this. We got the Gaza plan, and we got a peace plan. And I'm going to tell you right up front, it's not a peace plan. It's a complete fabrication that this is anything like a peace plan. But it was a deal to release the hostages. In fact, I'll talk a little bit about that because we went down to Gaza the first day on our tour, and we went to Far Aza, which was one of the kibbutzim that was attacked on October 7th. At Far Aza, they're agricultural communes where everybody lives, and we went through the homes where people were killed. Bullet holes, machine gun, RPGs had gone off, and the families had made some of the homes into memorials to remember their children or family members that were killed there at Far Aza. Far Aza on October 7th had 925 residents. And they had a school there. The kids usually live in a dormitory away from the parents. It's a commune, okay? It's the old sort of a communist orientation. 925 residents on October 7th. When we were there a month ago, they had 15 residents. All those people left, and they've not come back. They're rebuilding, but who knows if or when those people are going to come back. So while we were there, though, there were there were 68 people at that kibbutz that were killed on October 7th. There were 18 taken hostage, and when we were there on October 8th, which was the day they celebrated the 2-year anniversary, because the day before was Sukkot, Shabbat, so they didn't celebrate on that day or remember. There were 2 twin brothers who were still held hostage, and because of this deal that was worked out, they were eventually released. That happened while we were there. And it's very interesting. I'll move to this. I was going to do this later, but I'll do it now because this is kind of interesting, the way biblical passages and things in Israel come to life when you don't even plan it. So when we got back to Jerusalem that night, we had dinner, and then we were going over to the city of David, where there's been incredible excavations, including, and I'll talk more about this in the future, we went to what's known as Temple Zero. Why would they call something Temple Zero? Well, we had Solomon's temple, which was the first temple, Temple 1. We had Herod's temple, which was Temple 2, the second temple. But if there's a temple found that predates those in the numbering system, you got to go to Temple 0. So we had a guide, Elisha Krohn. He was a guy who uncovered this temple there in the city of David. And he is convinced, and I think when you listen to him talk about it, that the temple that he uncovered there was actually the temple of Melchizedek, the priest of the Most High God. Now, a lot of archaeologists say, oh, no, Ellie, you're wrong. This has to be dated to the time of Hezekiah. But it's interesting that this temple was always preserved. There's an anointing stone there. We read Genesis chapter 28, which you can go read on your own, about how they treated these holy areas, the Jewish people, Abraham and then Jacob in Genesis chapter 28, anointing a stone. And it's clear that this happened. So this is in the city of David, not too far from this, but this is when we went over to the city of David. First of all, they said, well, we'll walk over to the city of David. It's like 0.6 of a mile. Google Maps says mostly flat. There's not a flat spot in Jerusalem. So if we went up the Mount Zion path, which it's so steep that they have a switchback for the walking path. And this is after we walked around all day. And then you go down, then you go up some more, then you get to the city of David, and you go down literally 7 flights of stairs to a viewing area which looks on this pile, what looks like a pile of rocks. It's not a pile of rocks, it's actually the wall that Nehemiah built when they came back from captivity in Babylon. And people dispute things. I'm telling you, there's no doubt in my mind, this is the wall of Nehemiah. And you can see other places where it is throughout the old city of Jerusalem. So the reason we went there was they had a special presentation, a light show that was projected on the wall of Nehemiah, a laser light show. You know, they have these things everywhere now. They projected the video presentation, and they had pyrotechnics and flames shooting out and all this. It was the story of Nehemiah, projected on the wall of Nehemiah in the city of David. And somebody pointed out a verse. So we were there during the Feast of Booths, the Feast of Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles. And so in Nehemiah chapter 8, first of all, Nehemiah 8 starts off with the fact that they discovered the book of the law when they were back. And they brought it out to read, and people were shocked because they had not read this for a long time. And so here they are, reading the book of the law in the city of David, probably at the wall of Nehemiah. And so Ezra reads the book of the law. And by the way, they found the seals and bullas and that type of thing with the names of people that are listed in the book of Nehemiah and elsewhere in these areas. And then that comes down here. So understand the context. We're in the city of David at the wall of Nehemiah while the world is talking about releasing the hostages. This is during the Feast of Tabernacles, the Feast of Booths. So here's what it says. The entire assembly of those who had returned from the captivity made booths and lived in the booths. This was happening all over Jerusalem. You see them hanging on balconies and elsewhere. The sons of Israel had indeed not done so from the days of Joshua the son of Nun to that day. In other words, they had not followed the feast, but we were in Jerusalem when they're following the feast and hostages are being released from captivity. And there was exceedingly great gladness. That verse lived out right in front of us in Jerusalem while we were there. It was an amazing time to be there. So so now we'll talk a little bit about some of the things else going on. So this was all over the press. You may have heard about it. About a year ago, a little over a year ago, a video was released that supposedly showed Israeli soldiers sexually abusing Palestinian prisoners. It caused a firestorm and really led to a lot of the virulent Jew hatred, anti-Semitism, anti-Israel, anti-Zionist things that we're seeing. While we were there, the IDF legal officer, this lady, was discovered to have leaked the video to the press. And there appeared to be, the belief was, there was evidence of her editing splicing these videos together on her phone. She disappeared for 2 days while we were there. There's a big nationwide search for her that everybody was saying she's going to commit suicide, that type of thing. Eventually she was found unharmed, but she didn't have her phone. So the belief then was that she threw the phone into the ocean. There was a offer of a reward of like $60,000, $70,000 to anybody who found the phone, and amazingly, somebody found the phone. After 2 days, supposedly in the water, an iPhone, the battery was still operating. It was a miracle. I said it was almost like the miracle of Hanukkah, where the lights stayed lit for 8 days. And Apple should use this as an advertisement for how good the batteries are in their phone. By the way, sidebar note, my battery failed while I was in my iPhone when I was in Israel. It went kaplooey, and of course it did it on a Shabbat, and everything closes early, so I had to go down to an Arab shop the next day and find I went to one, they said, well, we don't do that, but there's one 2 blocks down. Follow this lady. So she was full burqa stuff. So she never said a word to me and followed down, and she went like that. And so I went in that shop and they fixed my phone. But so anyway, so this phone is found, and by the way, it has the home screen has her picture on it. I don't do that on my phone. Do you put your own picture on your phone? I don't. Maybe people do. And of course, there were these text messages from her. So everybody's talking about the miracle of the iPhone in Israel. And now she's been arrested. She'll be charged with making up this video because it caused all kinds of problem for Israel around the world. And when you see the articles like the one that I just showed you, this comes out of the, I think this is out of the Wall Street Journal. Yeah, Thursday, November 13th, Israel pressed to investigate soldiers. And look at it, it says, as prosecutors under scrutiny, complicating the case of alleged abuse of Palestinian prisoner. And I've been through the details of this. I'm a lawyer. I was a trial lawyer for many decades. I'm telling you that they're never going to make the case against the IDF in this case. There are so many holes in the case, but this crazy leftist lawyer, of which there are many, particularly in Israel, leaked this video to cause damage to Israel and the IDF and maybe to undermine Netanyahu. I don't know. Everything she did was so irrational that we would love to see if there's an explanation for this because it just doesn't make any sense. As I talked to people in Israel, went to Gaza, and I was talking to IDF Special Forces people and others, and we're at the media summit. We're talking about how do we defend Israel? What's a good way to do it? Like facts. One of the facts I brought up, which was confirmed by some of the IDF people, is that since October 7th, babies have been born in Israel, or in Gaza. You know, and we talk about Gaza genocide and all this, and listen, lots and lots of people have been killed. There's no doubt about that. It's a war. There are not 300 miles of tunnels, by the way. They're now saying there are 900 miles of tunnels built in Gaza. Gaza is about 40 miles north to south, 5 to 8 miles east to west. 900 miles. It's more than the New York City subway system. More than the London subway system. They built this in this little tiny area as a terror base, using billions of dollars that they received from different people. In Gaza, since October 7th, in the first 18 months after October 7th, babies were born in Gaza. This is UN statistics, 50,000 babies. I know, you're shocked, right? The population is actually, at least according to some UN reports, and we believe everything the UN says, right? Except this, the population of Gaza is increased. Yet all the people in the world, the woke right, the Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson and all these people run around, it's the most, if it is a genocide, it's the most ineffective genocide in human history. Because there's more people now than there were then. And I'm not denying that people have been killed in the war. That's not the point. The point is the claim of genocide is complete, utter nonsense. There's a genocide going on against Christians in Nigeria. And so what did Tucker Carlson do in response to that? Because everybody says, why don't you talk about the genocide in Nigeria where Christians are being killed? Trump came out and said, we need to stop this, right? Finally, somebody in our government said something about it. So what did Tucker do? He gets a guy on, he's a lawyer, he's paid, I don't know, millions of dollars a month by the Islamic-oriented government of Nigeria to lobby for them. And he says, well, it's just Christians and Muslims killing each other, which goes on everywhere. It's not that big a deal. That was Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson is a propagandist. He is not credible on any single issue that he talks about. In fact, if he told us the time, I would check 2 clocks to make sure. You need to understand that this man is way off. And I'm going to talk a little bit about him and his orientation. So this was going on when we were in Israel. All this complaints about the IDF and genocide and all this. And I'm telling you, I was in Gaza. I walked along the border or the fence around the kibbutz on a couple of occasions. I went to Nova. And I talked at Nova for an hour with the first responder to arrive at Nova that day. I cannot tell you what he described that he found that was done to women and men by these monsters who came across the border. It was true at Nova. It was true at Nir Oz, another kibbutz we went to. It was true at Far Aza. This was a monstrous attack. And these people, for example, there's a special, they call him a rapporteur, that works for the UN that's supposed to look at these different claims of, problems that the Palestinians have. I'm not sure what rapporteur means. I think it's French for liar. She said there's no evidence of rape in Gaza. I talked to Special Forces IDF guys, some of the first guys to arrive at Nova and these kibbutzim, and they said the evidence of it was unmistakable. Now I'm gonna put a link in the video description under this thing later today of a video. I'm going to play part of the video, but there's a link to some videos that have been compiled about what happened on October 7th. It's very graphic. It's very disturbing. So unless you want to see that, don't look at it. But this is a modern atrocity. This is a modern Holocaust, and I think the story needs to be told. Okay. So Trump comes up with this peace plan, and here's a Wall Street Journal opinion article by my friend Jonathan Spire back in October, a couple weeks ago. The Mideast ceasefire is both a defeat and a victory for Islamists. It's not a peace agreement. It might be a ceasefire. It's not working. The attacks continue. There's still problems. We're down along the Gaza border. We hear these massive explosions. And there's a city we were in, Sderot, was attacked on October 7th. And these massive explosions happen in Gaza, and you can feel the concussion. And nobody in Sderot, they don't even flinch because they're so used to it after a couple years of this. At Sderot, by the way, we met at the cemetery at the grave of the first police officer killed in Sderot on October 7th with his widow. And she talked about what happened. 4 children, now 7 to 16, that she's raising alone. He'd been a police officer for 20, 25 years. Everybody loved this guy. He kissed me goodbye at 7:02. At 7:04, he arrived at the police station. Hamas had taken it over, and they shot him and killed him. Because of the situation, his body was in the vehicle all day, and every time Hamas went by, they shot it more. You need to understand we're dealing with monsters. So here's what Jonathan Spire says. Now that the guns have fallen largely silent in Gaza, it is possible to begin judging what 2 years of war have done to the Middle East. As the smoke clears, it becomes clear that the battles of the past 2 years haven't led to a fundamental strategic transformation of the region. The balance of power between existing power blocks has been somewhat altered, but no one has faced total defeat, with the notable exception of the Assad regime in Syria. And Jonathan is an expert on Syria, spent many years there. He's written about it extensively. I've quoted him extensively. In the Middle East, before the massacres of October 7, 2023, he says it was possible to discern three broadly defined power blocks. The first of which Israel was a part, consisted of states and movements committed to an alliance with the West, and the maintenance of a U.S.-aligned counter-radical security architecture is the key strategic arrangement in the region. The Abraham Accords of 2020 were an attempt to formalize this alliance. The second bloc consisted of mainly non-Sunni movements and regimes organized by the Islamic Republic of Iran. The alliance included the Lebanese Hezbollah organization, the Houthis in Yemen. This is all the different fronts that Israel's facing. The Iraqi Shiite militias, the Assad regime in Syria, and Hamas and Islamic Jihad among the Palestinians. And by the way, the problem with the Palestinian Arabs is not limited to Gaza. It's also existed in the West Bank. We went to a biblical site in Samaria, biblical Samaria, north of Jerusalem, called Joshua's altar. Now, where did they get that name from? It was an altar built by Joshua. No doubt about it. But to get there, we had to get off our bus, and we joined with a couple Orthodox Jewish groups to save on cost. Aaron Lipkin, some of you have heard of Aaron Lipkin. He was in the group, and we went on a bulletproof window bus with IDF escort to Mount Ebal near Nablus. And we get out and we walk up to the altar site. No doubt this is the Joshua's altar. No doubt at all. And there are drones flying overhead. You know, I had one drone sort of tracking me for a while. It was kind of very bizarre, but it was for security. And so these things have not been, the problems have not been solved. The war is not over. It's not a peace agreement. And the problem is that the way that this has been done by the Trump administration, let's be honest and blunt, they sent Steve Witkoff into Gaza to meet with a Hamas leader. He's talking, you've seen the interviews with him. He said, I went in there and, I talked to the Hamas leader, and, Mr. Hamas leader, I lost a son to a drug overdose, and so I have an affinity with you. This is a complete capitulation on the part of the Trump administration to their ideology. They don't view it as somebody coming to make peace. They look at somebody coming to build us up. Look how great we are that the most powerful country in the world comes to talk to us about making an arrangement. That's how they view it. And so it's a problem. Let's see. So anyway, so Jonathan, you can get that article, Wall Street Journal, and read that. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember why I put that one in. One of the problems that's going on in the world, this is affecting almost every nation except Israel. Demographics. I talk about it all the time. There is a demographic collapse in the world. China is losing tens, maybe hundreds of millions of people over the last few years. Japan's population is declining by the millions each year. South Korea has a birth rate in their cities of like 0.28 fertility rate. You need 2.1 to reproduce. So in order to have as many people in the country after one generation, you need to have a female fertility rate of 2.1. South Korea, it's 0.28. A lot of European countries are 0.3, 0.5, and others. In cities in China now, the statistics are coming out based on things released by the Xi Jinping government. Is it Xi Jinping? Whatever his name is, Xi, that the birth rate in some of these cities is 0.2. That is a culture that's going to die. Even Turkey has had a big fall in their birth rate. The Palestinians have had a big fall in their birth rate. Let me just say something about that. So we went to Efrat. It's a Jewish settlement in Judea, about halfway between the south Jerusalem and Hebron, which I'll talk about in a moment. We met with the mayor of Efrat. We met with the developer. We met with the member of Knesset, Ohad Tal, from the National Religious Zionist Party. He has a minister. I think he's Minister of Diaspora Affairs or something in the Netanyahu administration. And they're building 7,000 new homes in Efrat. Why? They're expecting a lot of Jews to come. And the birth rates, particularly in the Orthodox community, is, from someone who grew up in America, the number of children that you encounter in Israel, particularly in Orthodox neighborhoods, is shocking. It really is. Like my flight back from Israel, we flew from Tel Aviv to Toronto. I would say 2/3 of the flight was Orthodox Jews because they were coming home from Sukkot. There must have been 80 kids under the age of 12 on the plane. 20 babies under the age of 1. Now, I don't mind that, okay, but it's growing up where we grow up, even in an area that's growing, it's shocking. It's just absolutely shocking. So you see this all the time. So birth rates are declining, and I don't know exactly how this plays into Bible prophecy and the political alliances and the geopolitics, but it's something I think we need to talk about and look at and pay attention to. So there's a lot of things going on with the Saudis, and this was in the the New York Times yesterday. Trump Organization is said to be in talks on a Saudi government real estate deal. We're talking in the tens of billions of dollars. And this, I have a problem with this and the way it looks and the alliances that are formed. Jared Kushner has done deals with Qatar. Steve Witkoff has done deals with the Qatar. The Trump organization has done a deal with Qatar. Now they're talking about doing maybe something in the order of, well, the total development in Saudi Arabia is $63 billion. You can build a lot of stuff for $63 billion, and I just don't like the looks of this. So here's Donald Trump Jr. During some of the meetings, this was a few months ago, looking at this development that's being done in Saudi Arabia. The problem is we do not understand the nature of the enemy that we face. So everybody on the woke right is, well, Israel's dragging us into wars and everything. Listen, we actually have a common interest with Israel about the enemy that we need to fight, this Islamist enemy. Go read Amy Meck, M-E-K, on X. Follow her at Rare Foundation. I think it's rarefoundation.com or .org. She's been tracking what's going on in Texas. I had meetings with people in Texas less than 2 months ago about the Islamic, I don't know how else to describe it, the Islamic invasion of Texas. It's shocking. And people locally were elected to school boards that are Muslim while I was in Israel. In the last election we had, not even 2 weeks ago. So don't tell me that it's just Texas or it's Dearborn. No, we have a problem and we don't understand the nature. And Israel is really on the front lines of this. And if you don't think it's a problem, one headline, one newspaper should tell you after the November election, was this guy elected as mayor of our largest city, Mondami. He is a Muslim, Marxist, leftist radical. He celebrates what happened on October 7th to Israel. There's proof of this all over the place. Don't tell me that it's not true. So he gets elected, and what did he do? Remember, he was asked in a debate, and Tucker Carlson was the first one to jump on this. Where would you go to visit as mayor of New York? And a lot of guys said, I'd go to Israel, I'd go here, I'd go to Israel. And Mondami, what did he say? I'm only concerned about New York. I would go visit neighborhoods in New York. So what did everybody think? Well, he's only concerned about New York. He doesn't have a bigger agenda. Oh, really? Where did he do his first speech? Look at the optics, people. He did it in front of the World's Fair, 1964 World's Fair Unisphere. You might remember it from Men in Black movie. I think the final scene was at this. The optics are, I'm about more than New York. I'm doing my speech in front of a globe. There is a much, much bigger agenda. Watch the optics. And there's a lot of things coming out about the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, of which he is a part, and how they're funding all of these people, AOC, Mondami, all these other people, because there's a big agenda, and the big agenda is to tear down the West. I found this editorial cartoon kind of interesting about Mondami. I thought that kind of says it all about what this guy is about. We have Turkey. I've used this poster ad nauseum. At the media summit, they had a panel one day, and there was a lady on, you may recognize her. Her name is Rawan Osman. Very pretty. Well, I looked her up, so she's 42. Very, very articulate, hundreds of thousands, way more social media followers than I'll ever have. And I talked to her, I said, I want to interview you. I explained a little bit about who I was. I said, I want to talk to you about Turkey. And I went to my computer, it was lunch. So I talked to her for about 20 minutes, and I gave her this poster. This poster from the Turkey, Erdogan's son, the president of Turkey, led a protest in Istanbul at the Galata Bridge on January 1st, 2025. And she looked at it and she said, she pulls out her phone, starts taking pictures of it, because she goes, this says it all about what we're facing, that there's a big agenda behind this. So remember, so the thing at the top says, yesterday, Hagia Sophia, symbolic. Hagia Sophia is an Orthodox church, and everybody says, well, their theology is bad. Okay, Erdogan doesn't know that. He thinks it's Christian. Yesterday, Hagia Sophia, the largest church ever built in the history of Christianity. He turned it into a mosque 5 years ago. This was in January 1st. In the middle, it says, today, Umayyad. Today, Damascus. What had just happened? The Syrian regime had fallen. Erdogan, and listen to how Trump trolls Erdogan when they're around. I know you did that, and I know what you did in Syria. That was really pretty amazing how you did that. I know you'll say you didn't do it, but we all know that you did. You know, just like Trump will say stuff to Erdogan like, you know, you should know something about stuffed ballot boxes and the elections you've run. I mean, I do enjoy the way he kind of trolls other people at times, as long as it's not me. So today, Damascus represents the Shia Islam, has fallen to Sunni, and tomorrow, Al-Aqsa, Dome of the Rock, Jerusalem, and the Jews. So Christians, Shia, Jews. That's Erdogan's agenda. So there's a good article at Spectator magazine about why Israel fears Turkey's involvement in Gaza. So what's Trump proposing to do? Well, they're going to have a, forget what it's called, Independent Security Force, or ISF. Who's going to run it? Qatar and Turkey. And Israel saying, no. I don't understand what's going on. Some of this stuff is beyond me to try to rationalize or support. I think it's insane. It's not going to be peace. You can't establish a Turkish force on the border of Israel. That's Erdogan's dream. And so we're watching, and by the way, this stuff has Bible prophecy implications to it all over the place, and it's unfolding right in front of us. And what do a lot of people say? Well, I don't know if it's important or not. Turkey, well, yeah, it's kind of involved. It is involved. Stop ignoring the facts that are right in front of your face. And then this is another article at Middle East Forum that just came out today, and it says, here's yet another front that Israel's facing. So we have Syria, we have Lebanon, we have Iraq, we have Iran, we have Yemen, we have Judea, Samaria, the West Bank is a problem, and of course Gaza. And now they're saying, there's this tripartite alliance rising up that Israel needs to be concerned about: Libya, Egypt, and Sudan. Now look, when you look at Ezekiel 38, it talks about Libya, Put, and Sudan, Cush, being involved in this end-time invasion of Israel. Now, I'm not saying that that's imminent or going to happen tomorrow, but everything is lining up that way. And despite 2 years of war, in which Israel has been incredibly successful, the threats have not disappeared. They are still there. And so here's a analysis this way. And so now we're having a UN Security Council resolutions being submitted by the U.S. Russia's opposing it. They've submitted their own. But listen to what this guy says: a blooming clash with Washington as the UN Security Council prepares to vote on the ISF, the Independent Security Force in Gaza, tasked among other things with dismantling Hamas. Officials in Jerusalem tell me the U.S. is pushing to start the rebuilding of Gaza immediately before resolving the question of Hamas disarmament. This comes amid mounting reports of trouble forming the International Stabilization Force and growing Israeli doubts that disarmament is even feasible. Disarmament of Hamas. That would be one of the goals that I think everybody should have. A senior Israeli official tells me it won't work. In the end, we'll demilitarize ourselves, just like we did in Lebanon, just like where the French, as expected, do nothing. At the same time, Israel is also worried and disappointed with the last-minute change in the draft resolutions language. You can find the documentation of this. So what the U.S. submitted as part of this resolution to be considered by the UN Security Council, it speaks of, quote, a pathway to Palestinian self-determination and statehood. Now, the Trump administration will say, oh, well, that's not what we're doing. Don't worry about it. It's not that big a deal. It is that big a deal. It's a very, very big deal. And so Jonathan has been very busy lately writing articles. This is one in the Jerusalem Post about a week and a half ago. Hezbollah's slow but steady reconstruction. So they took us up, the government media summit, they took us up to the Lebanon border. We went to Metula, as far north as you can get in Israel, right on the Lebanon border. You can see the UN security, the town of Metula that's being rebuilt, still about 90% unoccupied. You see the UN security vehicles going along the border there, the border fence. That evening, after we got back to Jerusalem, they're bombing southern Lebanon, right where we were. And the next day they're bombing it because why? Hezbollah is rebuilding. They were devastated, thousands killed. The pager attacks, Nasrallah killed. And so what did they do? They doubled down on rebuilding. And it's still a problem. So what Israel's trying to do is prevent it from where the rockets fly. I mean, we're driving by buildings. You can see where rockets hit right there along the road. So Jonathan Spire did an interview with ILTV. I'll put a link when I get home today in the show notes so you can listen to this. Peace with Syria, war with Lebanon. And so Jonathan said this. He unpacked the uneasy gap between the U.S.-backed Gaza plan and facts on the ground. He notes Hamas retains control over significant parts of the Strip, the Gaza Strip, and is rebuilding authority, raising hard questions about how an international stabilization force could disarm it without constraining Israel's freedom of action. You think that Turkey, if they're part of this ISF in Gaza, they're going to be, oh, Israel, we got a problem over here. Would you guys kind of come in and take care of that? No, why? Because Hamas is Muslim Brotherhood. Turkey is Muslim Brotherhood. The people are able to come and go around the world because they go through Turkey, the Hamas people. Erdogan's not going to stop this. I don't understand what's going on. Spire also warns that Lebanon's Hezbollah is rearming while the Lebanese armed forces lack the will and ability capacity to disarm it, making a future Israel-Hezbollah escalation likely. Iran, all kinds of stuff in the Iranian press and elsewhere. They're building missiles like there's no tomorrow. And maybe for them there is no tomorrow. I'll talk about that in a moment too. So the other thing that happened too is this guy comes to Washington. And he's talking to Israel. He's a man of peace. He is a jihadist in a suit with a trimmed beard. And he's welcome. I mean, look at this stuff at the White House. This is shocking to me. This is just absolutely shocking to me. It's you could try to make the case that this is okay, and I'm telling you, you would fail. You cannot make the case that this is okay. And so when I was talking to Rahman Osman, I brought up the subject of Thomas Barak, who's the special envoy. I think he's the ambassador to Turkey and also special envoy to Syria and Lebanon. And Rahman knows the area. She grew up. She had a Sunni father, a Shia mother in Lebanon. She knows this. She hated Jews. She moved to Europe and met Jews, and she said, hey, they're not so bad. Now she's moving to Israel. And I talked to her about Barak, and the first comment she was made, oh, that guy is corrupt. So I hope to interview her in the near future. But here he is in the White House. And the optics of this are very, very bad. And then there was this. I don't understand what's going on here. You see J.D. Vance there. You see Thomas Barak there next to J.D. Vance. You see Al-Shara in the middle. I believe that this guy in the purple tie is the Turkish foreign minister. Why? Well, because Turkey was behind the revolution that brought down the Assad regime in Syria. This is all connected. I don't understand this. And this one, I don't get at all. So I hope you see that he's doing sort of a salute Muslim thing. Trump's doing a salute. The optics of this one is so bad, it makes me very, very upset. So on our tour, and by the way, if you go to Israel, you need to go here. This is the Tomb of the Patriarchs in Hebron. There is no doubt that in a cave underneath this building, built by Herod over 2,000 years ago to commemorate the site, this thing has stood through earthquakes. The smaller stones on the stop, those were on top, were added after the Muslim era. But it's a Herodian structure. There's a cave under there where my friend Yishai Fleischer calls it's the tomb of the mamas and the papas, the patriarchs and matriarchs. Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebecca, Jacob, and Leah are buried there. There is no doubt. By the way, there's a Jewish tradition that there's another couple buried there named Adam and Eve. That's up to dispute, but there's no doubt this Abram bought this. In fact, the Torah portion this week for Shabbat, yesterday, they go through the Torah. So October 7th was Simchat Torah. It's the ending of the reading of the Torah for the year and the starting of the other one. That's when the October 7th attacks occurred in 2023. That's what was going on when we were in Israel a few weeks in early October. So they celebrate that, and then they start reading the Torah again. So they read a portion each week. What happens to be the Torah portion this week is Genesis 23. What happened in Genesis 23? Abram bought a cave, the cave of Machpelah in Hebron, because his Sarah died and he wanted to bury her. He didn't want to have, the guy offered to give him the cave, the field and the cave. He said, no, I want to buy it. I don't know, what was the price? 400 shekels of silver or something like that. And so, almost 2,000 years later, Herod comes along and says, we need to commemorate this site. And so you see there's a little platform in the lower right-hand corner. It's called the Seventh Step. After the Muslim era, for 700 years, there's a synagogue and a mosque on top. 10 days a year, the Jews have control of everything. 10 days a year, the Muslims have control of everything. We happened to be there on a day when the Jews had control of everything. They were expecting that day 45,000 Orthodox Jews to come to Hebron. It was a madhouse. But the Torah portion this week talks about Abraham buying that cave. But that area there in the lower right-hand corner is known as the Seventh Step. For 700 years after the Muslims conquered the area, Jews were not permitted to go beyond that area to pray. Now, they don't go there to pray to Abraham. They go there to pray remembering what Abraham meant about them. So it's a very important distinction. But for 700 years, they couldn't go beyond that step. Then something changed in 1967. The Six-Day War, Israel took over the area, and now they have access again. But Hebron is probably, Joan, I don't know if you agree with this, Hebron's probably the most divided city in all of Israel between Jew and Arab. It's really pretty tense. When we were there, we walked down to a place called the Hadassah House, which is a yeshiva. They have a museum there because in 1929, there was a massacre in Hebron. The Arab Muslims killed 68 Jews. About half of them from Ohio. They were yeshiva students, seminary students, studying there. You can see it. You can go get the New York Times archives, front page of the New York Times and other newspapers across America about the massacre. What prompted the massacre, by the way? The Mufti in Jerusalem, who was a friend of a guy named Adolf later, to help him get rid of the Jewish problem, went there, actually was banned from Israel for a while, and then he went to Iraq and worked with the guy, with the guy who started the Ba'ath Party to overthrow the Hashemite king of Iraq, related to the Hashemite king of Jordan, overthrew him. By the way, the Mufti had a nephew, at least it appears, that he trained. His name was Yasser Arafat. By the way, the guy in Iraq had a nephew. His name was Saddam Hussein. So do you see how all this stuff is connected? So we went to Hadassah House, and how did the Mufti provoke the attack on Jews in Hebron in 1929? He said the Jews are going to destroy Al-Aqsa. What led to the attacks of October 7th? A claim that the Jews were going to destroy Al-Aqsa. Do you see how everything is connected? Everywhere we went in Israel, it's like you're hearing the same story, just in maybe a different location. So Malka Fleischer, she said this about the Trump proposal and the UN Security Council thing that says a path to a Palestinian statehood. Now listen, the Trump administration will say that it's fake. Okay, why bother putting it in there then? Because it raises expectations on the part of the people that are enemies of Israel. So anyway, this is what Malka said in a tweet yesterday. This Shabbat, as the Jewish people made pilgrimage to Hebron to celebrate the first Jewish land purchase in Israel, the burial plot for our grandmother Sarah, the Trump administration announced it wants to create a Palestine ostensibly on our very land. What a horrible statement to the Jewish people, what a curse for America. I agree with Malka 100%. This is a travesty. So, and the UN will celebrate this. So here's Francesca Albanese. She's UN Special Rapporteur on Palestine. Look at what she tweeted yesterday morning, a little over 24 hours ago. Day 768 of the Palestinian genocide. Do you understand how this lunatic thinks? What happened 768 days ago? Is that when the genocide started? I did a calculation. October 8th, the day after October 7th, was 768 days ago. She says that's when the genocide started. Israel didn't even go in there to do anything for a month. She's a lunatic. She's a raving left-wing, Jew-hating lunatic. Happens to be from Italy. This is what everybody is facing. This is a lady that also works at the UN Special Rapporteur, violence against women and girls. No Palestinian plotted rape in Gaza. No independent investigation found that rape took place on the 7th of October. It's a complete lie. I talked to people who saw it. There's no reason for them to lie about this. Danny Danon, the ambassador to the UN, said any UN representative who denies Hamas rape must be removed from their post, period. It is a stain on the UN's reputation that Reem Al-Salam, the special rapporteur on violence against women and girls, denies the sexual violence that took place on October 7th. And she's responding, well, I didn't really say that. What did you say? You just said it. Words have meanings. So what's going to happen? You know, there's this plan, and this is from the Times, no, it's from the Guardian. And so are they going to divide Gaza? They're not going to be able to divide Gaza. Nobody's going to want to pay money and loan money to build big resort someplace when Hamas has control of the red area. The whole thing is insane. Now, here's another thing. This is Iran. A special report from the Middle East Forum the other day. This has been kind of building over time. The thirst of a nation. Iran is in extreme water crisis. The 5 main reservoirs around Tehran have less than 15%, they're filled to less than 15% of capacity. They have told people in Tehran, you may not have water coming out of the tap soon. What happens? So the Middle East Forum has a great report. I'll put a link in the description. What implication does this have on geopolitics of the region, let alone Bible prophecy things? Iran is an extreme water crisis. It's completely mismanaged their water resources. And so when I say cascading crises at the beginning, this is one of them. And listen, there are a lot of good Iranian people. The regime is very bad and needs to be gotten rid of. But how do you do that? I don't know. It'll destabilize the region. They're expecting, if this unfolds like it's going, they're not coming into the wet season. They desperately need massive amounts of rain, and it's not going to work. The dams, you can see the bottom of the dams in a lot of these reservoirs. What's that mean? That means they're empty. There's no water. 18 million refugees in Iran. It's about 25% of the population. What's that? And they go into other countries. They're going to destabilize other countries. Now, I know what's going to happen. I make a prediction. I'm not a prophet, but I'll make a prediction. Iran's going to go and say, hey, that's why we need nuclear power, to make up for the loss of hydroelectric capacity that we have from these dams, so we have electricity. So here's what's going on. Agricultural collapse. 1.3 million farmers unemployed, and putting up to 40 million people at risk of acute food insecurity within a decade. By the way, in the end times, one of the things we talk about a lot is acceleration. All of this stuff is going to happen much more quickly than anybody's predicting. Because if you told people you're going to starve to death tomorrow, they would have a problem in your culture. Energy grid failure. Critically low dam levels have crippled over 12,500 megawatts of hydropower capacity, creating a projected 25,000 megawatt national electricity deficit and facing chronic nationwide blackouts. And then urban and transport delay. And water's a big problem, especially when you don't have it. Okay. Here's a couple quotes from the art. The human cost of this collapse is projected to be immense. Medium case estimates for the next decade forecast 1.35 million excess deaths. They already are in a demographic collapse in Iran. 5 years ago, the Iranian government-sponsored newspapers came out and said, we have had the most rapid decline in female fertility of any country in human history over the last decade. Now you add this on top of it. And so what's the regime going to do? Are they going to try to do something now while they still have the people and the capacity? It's crazy. The current regime is structurally incapable of implementing the necessary reforms, as its survival is intertwined with the corrupt economic model that profits from the crisis. It's corruption all over the place. So now I want to go back to Gaza and what's going on. And I have a video clip I'll play a little bit of from a guy named Steve, the tour guide. He's a tour guide in Israel. By the way, I want to give him credit. There'll be a link. Go to his YouTube channel, subscribe. He has a Substack if you want to subscribe to that. There's a little cost to it. Do that. I hope to interview him this week or next week, because I think he is absolutely 100% spot on in the problem that we face in American culture with this anti-Zionist, anti-Israel, anti-Jew stuff, particularly coming from the right. But before that, I want to make one comment. I was at Nir Oz, and as I'm walking around Nir Oz, I see this sign on a building. Right behind me, to my left, is the fence around the kibbutz. 1 kilometer, half mile away, is the Gaza border fence. You can see the buildings in Gaza City beyond the fence. So this is where it happened. And at Nir Oz, half the kibbutz was taken captive or killed on October 7th. This is where in fact, near this place is the Bibas family. Remember the mother, the 2 little redheaded boys that were killed, taken hostage? But when I saw that sign, I thought, this sign explains everything you need to know about Gaza and October 7th and what led to it. Gush Katif. That's a road sign. Somebody put that on top of the building pointing towards Gush Katif in Gaza, which was a Jewish settlement in Gaza. And in 2005, the Bush-Cheney administration forced Ariel Sharon to evacuate every Jew, living and dead. They dug up every Jewish body that they knew of and took the bodies and the living people, sometimes by force, out of Gaza. I talked to the first responder at Nova. I said, well, maybe October 7th would have happened if Gush Katif wasn't evacuated in 2005. He says, no, you have not stated that accurately. It would not have happened if that had been done. If there had been Jews living in Gaza, October 7th doesn't happen. And this is a guy, veteran of the Lebanon wars and everything. So that's, and by the way, as we were leaving, I was talking to a group of people in the group. I said, this is a very important sign. This explains everything. So some people from the government press office, younger people, they came up and said, here, we want to show you something. So they took us into the common area. And in the common area, there were mailboxes. All the people in the kibbutz had a mailbox. You know, it's like the central part of an apartment complex, right? Signs all over the place. Killed, 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 murdered, kidnapped, 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 held hostage. All in these mailboxes. It's shocking. And they said, look, here's a picture. See that guy right there? That's the guy that put that sign up. He was the most pro-Palestinian, peace with Palestinian guy that lived in this kibbutz. He put that up as a message to people who think that the Jews have a right to Israel. It was sort of a smack in their face. He put that sign on top of that building. And a bunch of his family was killed on October 7th. So here's a little bit of Steve, the tour guide. He's analyzing why do we have this problem? Why do we have the problem with the Groypers? Now, who are the Groypers? That's the followers of Nick Fuentes. Who's Nick Fuentes? He's a Nazi. He's not being satirical. He is a fan of Adolf Hitler. So when he says that, I actually believe him. Don't dismiss this guy. So what happens with Nick Fuentes? Tucker Carlson has him on his program to talk about what he wants to do. He says he's going to destroy TPUSA with his Groyper followers, his Nazi-loving followers. So Steve, the tour guide, plays a clip from a TPUSA thing back at University at Ole Miss about a month ago, and he analyzes it. So I'll explain it, but let's just watch a little bit of the clip for right now.
I'm a Christian man, and I'm just confused why that there's this notion that we might have owe Israel something, or that they're our greatest ally, or that we have to support this multi-hundred-billion-dollar foreign aid package to Israel to cover this, to quote Charlie Kirk, ethnic cleansing in Gaza. I'm just confused at why this idea has come around, considering the fact that not only does their religion not agree with ours, but also openly supports the prosecution of ours.
Yeah, so
gets applause for this. He's a follower of Nick Fuentes.
A few things about this. First of all, when the President of the United States says America first, that means that he pursues the interests of Americans first. That is our entire foreign policy. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to have alliances, that you're not going to work with other countries from time to time. And that is what the president believes, is that Israel, sometimes they have similar interests to the United States and we're going to work with them. In that case, sometimes they don't have similar interests to the United States. And this example, the most recent Gaza peace plan that all of us have been working on very hard for the past few weeks, the president of the United States could only get that peace deal done by actually being willing to apply leverage to the state of Israel. So when people say that Israel is somehow manipulating or controlling the president of the United States, they're not controlling this president of the United States, which is one of the reasons why we'd be able to have some of the success that we've had in the Middle East.
Okay,
this is Steve.
Here we just saw J.D. Vance fielding a question from a self-identifying Christian. Okay, that's what this kid calls himself up front. Now, he's most likely a groyper, and we know that just based on the substance of the question that he asked. And in the question, this groyper refers to the Jews and Judaism as the persecutors. Now, he doesn't say the word persecutor, maybe in his nervousness. He says the word prosecutors. Okay, but what he really meant is persecutors, that the Jews and Judaism are the persecutors of Christianity. This on top of our, of course, being accused of rejecting Jesus, the Messiah. Now, J.D. Vance had an opportunity here in his answer to explain to this kid, what are you talking about? That the Jews are the persecutors of Christianity? Show me a time since the first century. Granted, in the first century, when the Christian sect was still a Jewish sect largely, okay, before the inflow of Gentiles, it's true that the same leaders of the Jewish establishment that instigated, the Romans, according to the New Testament, instigated the Romans to kill Jesus. Okay, we know that in that same first century that some of them, including Paul the Apostle, okay, Saul, before he became Paul, persecuted their fellow Jews who believed in Jesus. Okay, we know that from the book of Acts, but show me since that embryonic Christianity in the first century, when it was really still an intra-Jewish conflict between Jewish believers in Jesus and the mainstream of Judaism that rejected Jesus, show me a time in the last several centuries over the past 2 millennia where it's the Jews persecuting the Christians. That's crazy. I can show you many examples of the inverse, okay, of the church persecuting the Jews unto death, okay, expulsions, mass murder, the Spanish Inquisition, and again, the slanders and libels against the Jews, easily drawn from Christianity's writers by Hitler to justify his policies against the Jews. That I can show you, but show me.
So anyway, so I'll interview Steve and we'll go into more detail. This is a video you should all watch. Steve's analysis of what's going on the right wing, the MAGA right wing that's now anti-Jew, anti-Israel, anti-Zionist is spot on. He talks about Candace, he talks about Tucker, and what's going on there, and I think his analysis is correct, is that before Vatican II, the Catholic Church taught and believed that all Jews were collectively responsible for killing Jesus for all time. Vatican II changed that. There's now a pushback coming from people like Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, to push back against the Vatican II, saying, well, it was only some Jews. They want all Jews to be guilty of killing Jesus. And by the way, I never understood this. If Jesus doesn't die for our sins, we're in really big trouble, right? So I just think this is kind of a theological nonsense in the first instance, but it's what's driving Candace. It's what's driving Tucker. It's what's driving Nick Fuentes to restore the cat. And by the way, Candace's husband, George Farmer, is a big supporter of this. Pre-Vatican II, restore the Latin Mass and all this stuff, because we got too friendly to the Jews. This is what's behind this. This is end time Zechariah type stuff. So Steve does a good, and he goes back and he traces it to Augustine, the Augustinian development of thought that infects the Reformed Church. Oh, Israel's not important. It's over. It's been replaced. It's done with, all this other stuff. It's all connected. And we have a big, big problem. We need to be able to think about it and respond to it. I don't know that we're going to change people's minds. I'm not of that mind. But Steve, the tour guide, is his YouTube channel, and he has a Substack. And by the way, in the video that I pulled this from, he has a link to some of the video of October 7th. And again, watch it, but you need to understand you're going to see some pretty vile stuff. But it's an atrocity. It's a whole modern Holocaust, and I think you need to see a little bit of it to understand what actually happened down there in Gaza on October 7th. And by the way, the head of security at Nir Oz, that kibbutz, half the people killed or taken captive, he said, it wasn't Hamas that came over here. They didn't come here. It was regular Gazans. We have a massive problem. And now we have a guy like that as the mayor of New York. So in Jerusalem, you walk down Jaffa Street or take the light, it's one giant construction zone everywhere you look, massive apartment buildings. I went and looked down through some of the barriers. They're like 90-foot deep foundations. They're building massive buildings in Jerusalem. I don't know what the traffic's going to be like when they get this done, because it's already pretty much intolerable. So I've got one more thing and we'll finish with this. So I was walking, I went out one day, a friend took me over to the Jewish quarter, saw a video about the destruction of the Jewish quarter by the Jordanians in 1948. They flattened the place, killed people. There's a grave there, there's a memorial where they had a mass grave, including a 10-year-old young IDF soldier at the time who was killed in that massacre by the Jordanians. It happened. They destroyed the synagogues. Some of the synagogues have just recently reopened after being destroyed in 1948. So do the math on that, 77 years. And so I'm walking around through the Jewish quarter. In the Jewish quarter, they have the menorah that they've put together. So I go there, and this is what I saw on the left. That's the place where I'm like, I was there a couple days before, and I go back and it's like, there's no menorah. And I'm like, maybe they're really serious maybe they already started building the temple, but they're just refurbishing it, cleaning it up and everything. But I also saw this on the street. So this is in front of, they call it the House of Rothschild. It was a house for poor people that the Rothschild family built in the Jewish quarter. And this is what I saw just the other day walking around Jerusalem. This was Saturday. That's the House of Rothschild there in the background. So there's kids playing soccer in the square. There's old people walking around. A lot of activity. This is at the end of Shabbat last Saturday. Yeah, a week ago. I've lost track of time here. But also in that square, and I've been there, I've never been down to this area before a couple weeks ago, there's a plaque on the wall. You can kind of make out that this is Hebrew writing. And when I went there with my friend Roddy, he said, look at that. It was IDF, everywhere we went, there were IDF soldiers. In Gaza, there are IDF, the Gaza envelope, there are IDF soldiers. In Syria, there are IDF soldiers. And I will save a story about the Golan border for next time. One of the most powerful talks I've ever had by a Drew's mother whose daughter was killed in the Hezbollah rocket attack about a year ago in Majel Shams. But everywhere you go, there's IDF soldiers. They're learning about what happened. At Nova, there's IDF soldiers. Why are you here? We asked them. They said, motivation. We're going into Gaza to fight tonight. So they're learning history. They're training them about the history of Israel and what's happened in previous battles. But Roddy pointed to the wall, and there was a group of IDF soldiers, two of whom were Orthodox because they had the kippah on. They're literally leaning up against the wall, weeping, openly weeping. What is this verse? What is impacting them in this square? The kids are running around playing soccer. People are walking around. So here's the verse. It's from Zechariah chapter 8. Now, I'm not saying that this is the final fulfillment of prophecy, But what I am saying is something is going on. And so this is the verse, this Hebrew verse on the wall, if you translate it. Zechariah 8, verses 4 and 5. Thus says Yahweh of hosts, old men and old women will again sit in the streets of Jerusalem, each man with his staff in his hand because of age. And the streets of the city will be filled with boys and girls playing in its streets. We're watching this stuff unfold right in front of our eyes, folks. It's a very significant time, and I was very blessed to be there. And now I think I understand, well, it helps you understand a lot of things. And believe me, you don't. I act like you wouldn't believe me. I could talk for hours about it, and you know that I could. But pay attention. The cascading crises are leading to a point. Talk about acceleration, convergence. All of that stuff is happening right in front of our eyes. So let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for your word. Thank you for the gift of the prophetic scriptures to help us understand the times in which we live. We pray that we will use that as motivation to live holy lives and also to share the gospel with those around us. Bless us this week in Jesus' name. Amen.